Hello and welcome back. I've been playing the original Formula 1 game for PlayStation, replaying the 1995 season to try and win myself and John Lacey a World Championship, as, you know, neither of us have got one and thought it'd be quite nice. I've also been telling stories of F1 from the time that link in some way to the races I've been replaying. So this week I've done round 5 of the championship, which was the Monaco Grand Prix. So what happened? Well, it was the last race we ever saw the Simtek F1 team. After that they went bust and didn't compete again. So I thought it was the perfect time to tell of their short but eventful stay in Formula 1. This is the story of Simtek. My name's Ash. This is The Outside Line. The story of Simtek begins in 1989 with a big name from the world of motorsports. Max Mosley. Now, on the off chance you aren't aware of Max Mosley's part in the growth of F1 and his impact on the whole of motorsports in general, that's a separate story all on its own. All you need to know for now is that he was a founder and co-owner of the March Engineering team and a former legal advisor to the Formula 1 Constructors Association, or FOCA, where he helped to negotiate the original Concord Agreement with the rule makers of F1 at the time, FISA. Like I said, a whole other story, but you get the idea. Max Mosley has already had a hand in shaping the sport, and by this point he's not even reached the height of his powers. Anyway, in 1989, fellow March Engineering founder Robin Hurd introduced Mosley to Nick Worth. Nick Worth was an aerodynamicist for the March F1 team in 88 and 89, and also designed their active suspension system, working under a new designer in the sport called Adrian Newey. Wonder what happened to him. Together, Mosley and Worth formed Simtek Research, an engineering consultancy firm which aimed to provide cost-effective yet high-quality design and research and development services, including wind tunnel construction and chassis building, to motorsports teams. Some of Simtek Research's clients included Formula 3000 and IndyCar teams, as well as the F1 team Ligier and the FIA itself. A few of Mosley's motorsports connections coming in very handy there, I thank you. In 1990, Simtek secretly designed an F1 car for BMW, who were looking at entering their own team. However, the plan never materialised and BMW entered the German Touring Car Championship DTM instead. Nick Worth, however, was hired to help design the iconic BMW M3 E30, and the cars were run by Simtek engineers. The BMW F1 design was ultimately sold to another team called Andrea Moda, and if you haven't heard of this absolute show of a team, well, FP1 has done a great video about their short stay in the sport, so check that out after this one, link in the description. In short, by the time Andrea Moda got their hands on the design, it had become outdated, although admittedly that was the least of their problems. In 1991, Mosley became FISA president and, spoiler alert, in 1993 would become FIA president for the next 16 years. So as a result, to avoid any conflicts of interest, he sold his share in Simtek to Nick Worth, making him the sole owner. In 1992, Simtek were commissioned to design a car for a new team, the Bravo Grand Prix team, who were planning to enter the sport in 1993. However, the project was aborted when tragically their founder and co-owner, Jean-Francois Mosnier, died suddenly of cancer. This latest setback made Worth restless and prompted him to enter Simtek as its own entry in the 1994 season with his own design. However, there was a slight issue with that, as it was essentially still based on the design Worth created for BMW back in 1990. It had been updated slightly for Bravo and would be updated again for their own entry. But despite that, entering a car in 1994 that was pretty much designed for the 1991 season, probably not going to be the most competitive. What also didn't help was the rule change ahead of 1994 that banned active suspension systems. Worth's design had incorporated the system. I mean, why wouldn't you? The technology essentially allowed Williams to dominate the last 2 seasons, but now he had to remove it, and it hampered the overall design. As a result, the car was heavy, and initially included a fully manual gearbox compared to the semi-automatics being used by the top teams, while the Ford engine they were running was also less powerful than the front runners. Resources would also be tight. Simtek entered the sport with only 35 employees, which was the least of any team on the grid, and a mere 10% of the number of people employed by Ferrari. There were some things on their side though. They had a big name title sponsor in the form of MTV Europe, and former triple world champion Jack Brabham became a shareholder, with his son David Brabham taking a seat in one of the cars for their debut season. For the other seat, a number of drivers blessed with an abundance of sponsorship backing, pay drivers, were considered. But in the end, Simtek would give a 33-year-old Austrian his rookie season in F1. Roland Ratzenberger. The first two rounds of the championship were not great. Round 1, Brabham qualified last and finished 12th, the last of the non-retired cars, while Ratzenberger failed to even pre-qualify. Round 2, both cars qualified at least, but again at the back of the grid. In the race, Brabham retired early with electrical failure, and Ratzenberger finished 11th, again the last of the non-retired cars. So, not a great start, but honestly, that would all pale into insignificance when compared to the events of Round 3, the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. During Saturday qualifying, Roland Ratzenberger would have a small off on his outlap, causing minor damage to his front wing. On his subsequent qualifying lap, the wing would fail at 190 miles per hour. The car would hit a concrete wall, and Roland Ratzenberger would tragically lose his life. Traditionally, a team would pull out of a race in the event of a death, but David Brabham wanted to race on in Ratzenberger's name and try to raise morale. I mean, imagine just 3 races in as a team, and not only have they been stuck at the back the whole time, but now they have to deal with the loss of one of their drivers. Brabham would retire on lap 27 after a spin, while the weekend was further overshadowed by the death of Ayrton Senna. The team would continue the season with "For Roland" painted on the airbox of the car. At Monaco, the team only had one chassis, so Brabham raced alone, qualifying 22nd ahead, yes, that's ahead, of the 2 Pacific cars, but retired late in the race due to engine problems. By the Spanish Grand Prix, Simtek would have another chassis ready so they could once again run a second car, and Andrea Montemini would drive it. However, he wouldn't drive it for very long. In practice, Montemini crashed heavily, breaking a toe and cracking his left heel, meaning he wasn't fit to race. Doesn't matter if he was fit to race anyway, as Simtek didn't have another chassis. And that would be the last time Montemini would drive for Simtek. As a result, once again, for the next 2 races, Simtek would enter only one car, with more unremarkable results. By the French Grand Prix, they would again have another chassis ready, and French driver Jean-Marc Gounon lined up to drive it. Remarkably, he would instantly deliver their best result of the season, a 9th placed finish where, and brace yourselves for this, Gounon would finish ahead of someone who hadn't retired. Scenes. However, the rest of the season would come nowhere near those dizzying heights, littered with retirements and finishes comfortably outside the top 10. While Brabham would drive the full season, Simtek would welcome a further 2 drivers into the other seat, including a home race appearance at Suzuka for the infamous Taki Inui, who crashed into the pit wall on lap 3. We love you, Taki. Nick Wirth was naturally disappointed. No points scored, and let's be honest, a literal nightmare of a first season. But he knew they could do better, so he pressed on to 1995, and Wirth had a plan to hit the ground running. Firstly, he tweaked his design to make the new car uncomplicated and hopefully quicker, with a more up-to-date Ford Cosworth engine underneath. Wirth also struck a deal with Benetton to use their old gearboxes and got their test driver Jos Verstappen on loan for the season, as David Brabham had left to race touring cars and Verstappen needed more experience after an eventful year at Benetton. In the other seat, Domenico Sciattarella, apologies if that's the worst pronunciation ever, would return after his 2 appearances for the team in '94 and share duties with Hideki Noda, who'd paid the deposit to race the second half of the season. MTV Europe remained their title sponsor, but reduced their commitment. Instead of paying them actual money, they gave Simtek airtime on their channel, so Simtek could sell this airtime to other sponsors for advertising. Sorry, hang on, that's rubbish. It's like Husky Chocolate turning around to McLaren saying, "So guys, we aren't going to pay any actual money, but here's 6,000 boxes of our drink, go shift that down the market and we'll call it quits, yeah?" Cushy. Come to mention it, that sounds like a plan another former title sponsor might have come up with. Is that what really happened, Gunther? I bet his spare bedroom is just filled with boxes of rich energy. Anyway, round 1 in Brazil was not an instant improvement with a double DNF. But in Argentina there were real signs of progress. Verstappen qualified 12th and was running as high as 6th in the race before a gearbox failure, thanks for nothing Benetton, put him out, while Sciattarella matched the team's best ever finish of 9th. So, this is the moment where things finally start to come together. No, actually, no, they don't. No, they don't at all. San Marino saw another double retirement, while Spain saw them finish comfortably outside the top 10 once again. And it was at this point troubles behind the scenes started to come to the fore. In the 18 months Simtek had existed as a Formula 1 team, they'd amassed a bit of debt. Not one that could be covered by your standard overdraft either. They were £6 million in the hole, and MTV's reduced sponsorship commitments hadn't helped. Worth also cited being a victim to a con sponsorship deal involving, in his words, bogus bank transfer documents. At Monaco, despite qualifying and lining up on the grid, neither car would complete a lap, with Sciattarella getting caught up in a first corner incident that saw the race red flagged, and his car was then further damaged after falling off the recovery vehicle. I wish I was making this up. While during the formation lap for the restart, Verstappen's gearbox failed again. Worth wrote after the race that a major new backer of the team, with whom I'd signed a contract before the season, has finally pulled out and left a large hole in our finances. He desperately searched for sponsors trying to keep the team alive, and they were technically still active at the Canadian Grand Prix despite not travelling to participate, but they couldn't be saved. No deal could be reached with new backers, so Simtek went into voluntary liquidation, which also forced Simtek Research to declare itself bankrupt too. 48 jobs were lost, and Simtek's assets were auctioned off. Nick Worth went on to become chief designer and later a board member of Benetton F1, and founded a new company called Worth Research, which worked with the FIA and the Acura LMP programme. He even returned to F1 with Virgin Racing, designing their 2010 and 2011 cars, which, okay, maybe the less said about those the better. At the time of Simtek's collapse in 1995, they became the 11th Formula 1 team to fold since just 1991. In that same time, only 3 teams had entered the sport that were still active at the time of Simtek's demise. 2 of them disappeared within the next 18 months, and only 1 team, Sauber, still exists today, albeit as Alfa Romeo. This has long been a problem in F1. The money required to enter and survive in the sport is too much for a lot of smaller teams to take, so they either don't survive or don't enter in the first place. With the new prize money split, performance levelling, and cost cap regulations coming, it remains to be seen whether F1 has fixed this issue, but we'll probably find out in the next decade. Simtek can take heart though. They weren't the first or the last to fail, and all things considered, didn't exactly get a lot going their way either. Maybe after all, it is better to be lucky than good. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, check out Will's video on Andrea Moda. That's an incredible story in and of itself. Absolutely insane. Next time, in my Justice for John Lacey series, I'll be replaying the 1995 Canadian Grand Prix. So naturally, my next Motorsport short documentary will be about his lone win in the sport. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.